Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
We are back with this bombshell breakthrough in the impeachment probe. A top diplomat and Trump loyalist reversing course and admitting a bribery plot with Ukraine. It's a major development because Ambassador Sondland, as we've been reporting, was handpicked by Trump, a top donor to the 2016 campaign, and someone who literally went to bat for Trump on this very scandal. He texted Trump's defense in real time. He claimed to Congress initially he didn't think there was a bribe. So tonight's news comes only after he faced new evidence and pressure for potential perjury. We've been covering how some Trump aides admit the whole bribery plot in public and claim it's okay. Some call it going full Mulvaney. This looks more like a reverse Mulvaney. Admit the plot after denying it. And while Mulvaney claimed that whatever happened was fine, Sondland's new testimony today says the Ukraine plot was improper and he assumed illegal. So how do Trump's Republican allies and the rest of Congress deal with this? I want to bring in, fresh and live from Capitol Hill, Jake Sherman from Politico, who's been all over the story, and John Flannery back with me. Jake, first of all, this news comes amidst some new developments you've been reporting on that Republicans are trying to fortify their defense. What do you got?
Yeah, so Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, House Republican Leader, and a close ally of Donald Trump, is going to place Jim Jordan, another close ally of the president, on the Intelligence Committee. And here's why that's significant. First of all, we don't really see many pinch hitters, so to speak, or substitutions on big committees like that in the middle of Congress for seemingly no reason. Sometimes there's a vacancy and you need to fill it, but that's not the case here. And the Intelligence Committee has basically become an impeachment committee. That's how Republicans see it. This is the center of gravity in this probe, and Donald Trump and the House Republican leadership want some of their strongest allies, their strongest defenders of the president on that committee. So we expect Jim Jordan to...
You say strongest. Other people, the Democratic side, have said, well, they're just reaching for people who will defend anything.
Yeah.
Put Jim Jordan as a spirited warrior in that context for us.
Yeah, strongest, I mean, most fervent, most firm, and most upfront in public. I'm not passing judgment on the character of what he's saying, but he has been willing to take proverbial bullets for Donald Trump for a long time.
You know, Jake, if you want a good pinch hitter, they got to be willing to go to bat, right? I mean,
yeah, that's right. And listen, I think there are some people who believe that Devin Nunes has not been up to the task. That has been chatted about kind of behind the scenes on Capitol Hill. And Jordan is somebody who will go out there publicly and defend the president. And remember, this is going to move to a public phase very, very soon.
So let me get you on that as well as our ace on the hill. You're talking about the public phase. I want to play a little bit of recent, but perhaps now wildly out of date remarks by Lindsey Graham, because he previously was hanging his hat on the idea that either there wasn't this bribery plot or it wouldn't be provable. Tonight, you have someone who's literally still Trump's ambassador corroborating it. Take a look at what we might call classic Lindsey Graham.
If you're looking for a circumstance where the President of the United States was threatening the Ukraine with cutting off aid unless they investigated his political opponent, you would be very disappointed. That does not exist.
Fact check, false. Evidence exists, and that evidence now has been stacked I'm going to go to you and then John. The evidence has been stacked from people that might be considered career or even critical of some of Donald Trump's policies to now someone who's loyal. Jake, how does that play out? I imagine we're not going to hear that argument from a lot of Republicans tonight.
The argument you're going to hear is that there was no statement from the Ukrainians at the end of the day, and the aid was restored. So could there be a quid pro quo? That's what I've been just on the phone with a lot of my Republican sources, and that's the line they've been firing back to me. And they say, listen, how could there be a quid pro quo if the U.S. has now restored this aid without that statement they were seeking?
John?
Yeah, well, it's the kind of Orwellian newspeak we've gotten used to when the evidence is there and manifest and obvious. And it's interesting to choose Lindsey Graham as an example of the point of the spear, if you will, because I first met him when he was coming to the Judiciary Committee, and he was sort of dropped in there to prosecute the Clinton impeachment. And he did that in the committee as actively as he could, and he became one of the managers that went over to the Senate. And we've since seen what he said then contradicted by his positions now. So the best you can say is that he is a flexible advocate. But worse than that is all of these members who are saying these things have seen the primary documents and the testimony. They know what they're saying is false. That means they're part of an obstruction. They're no better than the lieutenants of the obstruction by the syndicate that comes out of the West Wing.
To draw the point there, John, that's what I think Gordon Sondland may have been worried about. Jake, on the Hill, last question with the little time we have. When will we see public hearings?
It has to be this month, and that's what Democrats are now saying. But again, then we're going to enter a real high wire phase here where Republicans and Democrats both have significant risks, according to people in both parties. I mean, Republicans do run the risk of grasping at straws, they think, and they think that they are going to have to try to create distractions to detract from what is now quite clear in testimony. The big question for Democrats is who do they bring to Capitol Hill to testify? Who is up for it, and how many people can they get to Capitol Hill to testify publicly against the sitting president? And it's not entirely clear yet. There's some names being batted back and forth, but this is a high-pressure situation and historic situation, so we'll have to see who they choose and how that plays out.
It is Wednesday, the 6th of November of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Oh my, what a lovely egg dish with a velvety hollandaise sauce. Expertly and sophisticatedly conjured up for your culinary pleasure, real or virtual, indeed. Well, also Smothered Benedict Wednesdays has a slight association with no one rid me of this meddlesome priest. And we certainly have a lot of those around now, don't we? I wouldn't necessarily define them in the strict definition of priest, because mostly the idea of a priest is someone knowledgeable, though, maybe not necessarily doing all of God's good work. That sort of image does get conjured up, but the kinds of priests that we have, the sorts of priests that we have here, grifting, as most religions do, you gotta part people with their money. Paula White. I know I shouldn't keep on this Paula White jack, but it just irks me to no end. She and her husband come as a package deal, by the way. Yeah, boy, you'd think Anton LaVey is dead. I think he might have jumped into this guy's body. I'm serious. Not that Anton LaVey was a bad guy. Actually, I met Anton LaVey a couple of times, and, he was, he wasn't evil. Not that you can see. No, people's public persona sometimes, they let the guard down when they are in unguarded moments. And you see what they look like with the mask off, as we all do. So, Paula White has the guy in the Oval Office has his ear, which is, I guess, a good thing. Is it? I just don't know. Oh, I have some opinions about it. It is not a good thing. talk about separation of church and state. Of course, people can still argue that it is still a separation of church and state because whatever Paula White is doing is not of the church. It's a grift, but it's certainly not religious. And we can discuss the heretical nature of her teaching and the whole idea of the prosperity gospel, etc., etc., etc. We've done that already. And we'll probably do it again in a comprehensive takedown. Yes, I will be quoting St. Bernadette and St. John of the Cross. Trust me. Maybe even Annie Dillard. Who remembers Annie Dillard? No one remembers Annie Dillard anymore, and she's still around. Writing some great stuff, too. So, we had an election last night. Yes, elections do have consequences. And as David mentioned at the top of his show, Julie Briscoe won her seat. First time running, won a Board of Supervisors seat out there in Virginia. And, of course, we all remember her as the woman who flipped off Trump's motorcade. And then she was duly fired. She had a government job. She was duly fired because her boss was afraid that, Trump might say something bad to him, like, "You're fired." Trump would never say that. He'd have someone else do it. I think at that time it might have been his bodyguard, Sleester, the tall guy, the jarhead, former cop, former NYPD, by the way, which is everything you need to know if you want some bad things done. Get yourself a former NYPD cop. They know how to do it. And they will. So, got a governorship in Kentucky. We'll see how that fares. I always consider it odd when you're going to vote, right? And you vote for the guy to be governor that you really like, but somehow the down ballot stuff people don't vote on the down ballot stuff? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. But touchscreen ballot and paperless ballots, a lot can be manipulated in those down ballots. Weird. I have this terrible feeling that once again we're seeing the outcome of maybe a perceived manipulation, because how is it that Democrats can come out in droves? More people have come into this election, in an off election, than ever before in Kentucky, and they voted for Beshear, but they didn't vote for the other people on the down ballots who are also Democrats? No. So we'll see how that shakes out, and but it does portend something that Mitch McConnell better start thinking about. I'm hoping that Amy McGrath might be able to unseat him. She's not the perfect candidate by any means, but no, not everybody can be as liberal as Eisenhower. We keep looking for somebody. We think that maybe Warren will be like Eisenhower, but you know what? The John Birchers were right. Eisenhower was a commie compared to how right everybody else is in this country, at least the toxic third who keeps pulling everybody to the right. We have to keep electing more right-wing Republicans to the point where Eisenhower is really too liberal even for the Democrats now. Well, Junior has a book, and there was some debate on whether he had a ghostwriter, and I got to tell you, I don't think he had a ghostwriter. I think Junior wrote that book. Because I got to tell you, it's so badly written, you will want to chuck it out the window, throw it in the fire, tear it up, and put it in the trash. You'll be triggered after the first 2 paragraphs. It's that badly written. You have to be a very special sort of ghostwriter to be able to affect the writing style of your client. Some do. They try. But they usually give up and say, nah, I just have to make this legible so people will be able to read it. And I then realized this book is not for the reading public. It's for people who have never read a book in their life. And they have trouble reading the little cryon on the bottom of the news channels, like Fox. They try. It gets in there somehow, but they're not really reading it. It's programming them, which is what it's supposed to do. But these people don't read books, but they're going to have it so that they can walk around Walmart with their open carry 45s to trigger people. Own the libs. Well, owning the libs and undoing everything the black president did has some consequences, as we're going to talk about later on in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. In fact, maybe we better start getting in on what we have in store for you, the curated part of the show. Well, of course, at the top, that was a breakdown that explaining after Sondland added a bribery confession to his testimony. Yeah. Trump allies and the GOP scramble to prep a new impeachment defense. And what will that defense be? So what? So what? You're going to impeach us over that? Try. And we will. On the rest of the menu, ICE agents tried unsuccessfully to confiscate student records without a subpoena at a Florida elementary school. All right, I won't make any Teutonic references, not yet. Almost 2.5 million poor Americans have lost vital phone services under Trump because he thinks the black president put that program into effect. How little this guy knows. And Devin Nunes threatened to sue the Fresno County DA for ignoring a fake cow on Twitter who Devin really hates. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where Boris Johnson has withheld a government report on Russian meddling to avoid devastating revelations about Brexit and his own campaigns. Boris, shame on you. And Iran will start injecting uranium gas into centrifuges at its underground Fordow enrichment facility because that's what happens when you have to undo everything the black president did. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com to the rightish of the page. Right there by the social media scroll is our chat room link, and Callie Lincoln takes care of that as a monitor, and thank you, Callie, for doing so. To the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon site. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. This powerhouse of resistance would not be able to be resisting as we have for the last 8+ years of 24/7, 365 resistance without your generosity. And we really appreciate and thank you from the bottom of our resisting hearts for your help in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended all those many decades ago, almost an eon. Almost. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio, and Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom for doing that. I take care of at Justice Putnam, and most importantly, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and that's where all the source material is. So you can wade through what is really the story, sans the embellishment and dramatic interpretations. Follow the show on Twitter at CookbookWest, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. All right, let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Michelle Caseda and Eric Altman of TV station WPTV out of Palm Beach County, Florida, brings us this first offering. 2 special agents with Homeland Security investigations visited an elementary school in Palm Beach County this summer and attempted to obtain information on a student without a subpoena. The school district of Palm Beach County says it did not provide the agents with the information. Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI, is one of 2 main branches of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, otherwise known as ICE. A spokesperson for ICE confirmed the agents went to the school, but says they were not on school grounds for any enforcement-related actions, including an immigration removal or anything civil or criminal. Yeah. Not on the premises of the school campus, of course. No. We know what they're doing. They're finding out where the kid lives and who lives with the kid. I said I wasn't going to get into any Teutonic references. Well, that was then. You can imagine the stiff-legged goose-step march that these people will be putting on for half a year. On Make America Great Appreciation Day. I think that's going to be on July 4th from now on. Schools are considered a sensitive location under the sensitive location policy for ICE. That sounds like a catch-22. The policy says enforcement actions should only occur under specific circumstances, and enforcement actions should generally be avoided in those locations. Get off campus and bust them across the street like you normally do. A spokesperson for ICE says the agents did not violate the policy by visiting the school that day, since there was no enforcement-related action. They were just there on an intelligence gathering. It's not enforcement. We're just trying to spy on people. Maybe a judge would say that is a form of enforcement by a law enforcement agency, now wouldn't they? That's why they didn't do it with a subpoena. The ICE spokesperson told WPTV that Homeland Security Investigations had taken a parent of a student into custody on a narcotics charge. You mean they had a joint? You went through all of that to bust a parent who was probably brown for a joint so that you can justify getting rid of all those people and building a wall. According to the spokesperson, on June 26th, Homeland Security Investigations visited the elementary school in an attempt to get contact information from the other parent of the student, or for the other parent, after the parent in custody told agents they had a child in school. Oh, really now? So they got one parent, put the screws to her, and then busted the other parent because they had a joint. Records reviewed by WPTV show the agents wanted to know if the student was at school that day, and were seeking both the address and phone number of the student's parents. The sole reason for our being there that day was to notify the other parent. We were just trying to do the right thing by busting them both and separating the kid from their parents. How nice. Christopher Gaston, a local immigration attorney, disagreed. I think the way it was handled makes it clear that that was not the goal. A simple phone call would have been sufficient, said Gaston, adding, law enforcement officers generally know that as far as getting that information from a school or hospital or whatever, there's privacy laws that are in place, and they have to follow the proper channels. But that's only proper channels in a representative democracy, isn't it? Former FBI agent Stuart Kaplan echoed Gaston's sentiment, saying, I would simply pick up a phone and speak to an administrator. Kaplan noted that it is not uncommon for agents to try and find another parent in this type of situation. However, Kaplan said it is unusual that the agent asked for information that is protected. The district rebuked the agent's offer, telling WPTV that due to FERPA, the district does not give out student records without proper authorization. Kudos to the school district for doing exactly what should have been done, said Gaston. Instead, school officials agreed to contact the parent on the HSI's behalf, according to both the district and ICE. In an email obtained by WPTV, Central Regional Superintendent Valerie Haynes wrote, Homeland Security visited one of our schools recently and requested information. The school did everything right and did not provide any information. Instead, they reached out to our office and then to our legal staff. The email includes the district's immigration enforcement protocol and encourages the staff to share this important information with your office staff, counseling, and admin team. The protocol says personnel may not confirm the enrollment status or provide any information regarding a student without prior authorization from the superintendent's office. Within ICE, Homeland Security Investigations is responsible for criminal investigations that cover more than 400 U.S. laws. You know, you got a little bit of pot? Come with us. Although the visit had nothing to do with immigration, the incident occurred just days after ICE executed a high-profile nationwide sweep targeting more than 2,000 people for deportation. The operation only netted 35 arrests. It also came on the heels of federal officials backtracking on a proposal to send hundreds of undocumented immigrants in Texas to South Florida. The school district of Palm Beach County has a policy on how staff should handle any requests from outside law enforcement. We have learned that HSI made multiple contacts with the school district of Palm Beach County in June for separate criminal investigations not pertaining to any schools or the district. Oliver Willis of Share Blue Media brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. At least 2.3 million low-income individuals have lost access to phone services subsidized by the federal government under the Trump administration, according to a new report for the Center for Public Integrity and USA Today. The Lifeline program, which operates under the Federal Communications Commission, was established in 1985. Gee, I wonder who was president then. I'm pretty sure it was Reagan. The service has in recent years been attacked by Republicans and right-wing media, including Fox News and Sinclair, as the purported provider of Obama phones. And I hear that term bantered about around here, and some people refer to their Obama phone in not as a pejorative, but as a really nice thing. But by calling it an Obama phone plays into the propaganda. They only have it because of Obama. No, the Lifeline program was established during the Reagan administration. Yes, granted, Obama might have expanded it some into rural areas that have needed it, but only within what the regulation allowed. Now, the Lifeline program has provided a discount on phone service for qualifying low-income consumers to ensure that all Americans have the opportunities and security that phone service begins. You know, like tornado alerts. Who this hurts the most, though, are those red rural districts with all that land that has to vote for Trump. Crystal Rhodes, a member of the Nebraska Public Service Commission, said this is a deliberate and disgusting assault on people who live in poverty. The National Association Regulatory Utility Commissioners, which represents state public service commissioners across the country, passed a resolution in July slamming the new system, meaning the new system that's going to be put in place because we got to get rid of the Obama phones. Many potentially and apparently eligible Lifeline subscribers have not been re-verified, and some have been de-rolled from the program, and new enrollments have dropped substantially in states where the National Verifier has been hard launched. And the National Verifier is this new system. FCC Commissioner Ajit Pai, a Trump appointee, has insisted that addressing fraud was the main motivation for making changes to the Lifeline system. The only fraud perpetrated here was calling it an Obama phone. These cutoffs of the Lifeline services for the poor really does resonate and echo other initiatives designed at cutting help for the needy. In addition to pushing millions off the federally subsidized phone program, Trump has worked to limit the number of people who can receive food assistance, changing current rules that permit states to waive work requirements for those experiencing difficulty in finding a job. He's also sought to deny green cards to poor immigrants who need those documents to access Medicaid, food stamps, and other government benefits. And the Trump administration has been criticized for failing to file reports on actions taken to address environmental concerns in low-income or minority areas, reversing the trend of regular updates under the Obama administration. Well, there it is. Irby of the Fresno Bee brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Representative Devin Nunes's attorney last month demanded that his 2018 Democratic political opponent pressure an anonymous social media writer to delete comments on Twitter that mock Republican Nunes, quote, day and night, end quote. Andrew Jans, the Fresno County prosecutor who ran against Nunes in 2018, interpreted the October 11th letter from Nunes' attorney, Stephen Biss, as a threat to sue him. This is the first step in a lawsuit. To send a demand letter like this, Jans said. Nunes in March filed a lawsuit in Virginia against Twitter, a Republican political strategist, and two anonymous writers behind social media accounts known as Devin Nunes's Cow and Devin Nunes's Mom, alleging they conspired to defame him during Nunes's 2018 re-election campaign. The letter to Jans focuses on the anonymous account known as Devin Nunes's Cow, which has almost 630,000 followers and frequently publishes appeals to support Nunes's political opponents. Prior to the lawsuit, it had a little less than 1,000 followers. Nunes and Stephen Biss, the lawyer, make clear in the October 11th letter that they believe Jans is either behind or controlling the anonymous author of Devin Nunes' cow. I'm sorry. Devin Nunes is using the force of government and his own personal pique to go after private citizens who are really expressing their First Amendment rights. Now, this is the 6th lawsuit filed this year. If you count this one against Jans, in addition to the lawsuit against Twitter, he's also suing McClatchy, the parent company of his hometown paper, the Fresno Bee, political research firm Fusion GPS, and progressive watchdog group Campaign for Accountability, and journalist Ryan Lizza, who last year reported that Nunes' family farm had moved to Iowa. And he also sued a retired farmer in the San Joaquin Valley and Democratic groups who unsuccessfully challenged Nunes' designation as a farmer on the 2018 ballot. Well, his campaign dropped that lawsuit filed in California shortly after filing it. I think there's a law about filing frivolous lawsuits, but maybe it doesn't apply to the lawless GOP. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from the break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we are going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth. This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Jonas Brothers teaming up.
Remember scrolling through the radio dial hoping a tune you liked would pop out of the static? You never had to listen too long to know you'd landed on a hit.
Music has a very strong, remarkably strong hold on us, so that it's enough to be exposed to a very brief snippet of a familiar song for us to be able to recognize it.
Maria Chait, an auditory cognitive neuroscientist at University College London. Chait and her team recently studied just how quick that reflex is. They started by asking 10 volunteers to name a feel-good, familiar song, like this. Then the researchers handpicked a second tune that sounded similar but was unfamiliar to the volunteer. They chopped both songs into tiny bits, each less than a second long, and then randomly interspersed them into a 6.5-minute long track of song snippets. As the snippets played, the scientists measured the volunteers' brain activity via a network of 128 electrodes, and they monitored changes in pupil diameter too, a sign of arousal. And the researchers found that the listeners' pupils dilated more rapidly when they heard familiar versus unfamiliar samples, within just 1/10 to 1/3 of a second. Familiar tunes also triggered a two-step pattern of brain activation, almost identical to that seen in other memory studies, where the brain first recognizes something as familiar and then retrieves more detailed information about it. That pattern was absent for unfamiliar songs and for the control group. The results are in the journal Scientific Reports. This study does have limitations. It used a small number of songs, it was hard to mask the purpose of the study from the participants, and the control group ended up being primarily international students from Asia, since they had to be unfamiliar with every single song, so their native languages and music backgrounds were different from the experimental group, which was primarily students from a European background. Still, for clinicians who want to use music as a therapeutic tool for patients with dementia, for example, this study might provide a few clues.
There's a lot of interest in trying to develop, so to speak, objective measures of music enjoyment, of music familiarity. And this sort of paradigm might be usable in this sort of context because it doesn't require the participants to indicate anything. They just listen passively.
Clinicians simply have to observe the neural fingerprints of hearing that same old song.
Now it's the same old song, but with a different meaning since you've been gone.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As fall turns to winter, the flu season will be upon us in force. The best way to avoid influenza is to get immunized. Everyone 6 months and older should be vaccinated. Those at increased risk for flu complications include children under the age of 5 and adults 65 and older, people with chronic health problems such as heart disease, asthma, and diabetes, and pregnant women. To get your annual flu vaccine, see your healthcare provider or go to a pharmacy, grocery store, or clinic in your area. If you get influenza, talk with your healthcare provider right away about antiviral medication. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Is the right to vote being gutted in America? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Let's begin by considering as an object lesson the recently announced voter purge in Georgia, where 300,000 names will be struck from the voter rolls, which is huge, 4% of all voters, in a state where the 2018 governor's race, Brian Kemp versus Stacey Abrams, was decided by 1.4%. The Georgia Secretary of State's office claims that this purging of the voter rolls is, quote, a routine process, but experience teaches that wholesale voter purges result in active voters being deleted, with the highest impact being on young people and communities of color. Taking a meat cleaver to an issue that requires a scalpel is wrong, and, as the advocacy group Fair Fight Action, founded by Stacey Abrams, asserts, voters should not be thrown off the rolls because they chose not to vote in 2 elections. The Supreme Court, 5-4, recently has given the green light to these state voter purges, as well as democracy-killing partisan gerrymandering, and the court has gutted the Voting Rights Act as well. In sum, powerful institutions, the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, far too often are marching in lockstep to undermine the essential pillar of democracy, voting. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1860. That was the day that Abraham Lincoln was elected 16th President of the United States. When Lincoln came to office, the nation was deeply divided on the question of slavery. By December 20th, South Carolina had seceded from the United States. Less than a month later, Confederate soldiers fired on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. With those shots, it became clear the issue of slavery would be settled by a civil war. The first year of the war was not going well for the Union. In December 1861, President Lincoln sat down to pen his annual message to Congress. In 1934, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt renamed that annual message the State of the Union. The speech still goes by that name today. By all accounts, the State of the Union was very grim in 1861. 11 states had seceded and were at war with the Union. Lincoln's long message to Congress included a summary of the war as well as foreign relations. But it ended with Lincoln's thoughts about the nature of work and labor in the United States. It included some of the most famous words ever uttered by a sitting president about labor. Lincoln wrote, "Labor is prior to and independent of capital. Capital is only the fruit of labor and could have never existed if labor had not first existed. Labor is superior of capital and deserves much the higher consideration." Lincoln ended his address by noting that the war that embroiled the nation would have a profound impact, not just on the current generation fighting. He wrote that the conflict would shape the vast future of the nation. Lincoln was felled by an assassin's bullet. He did not live to see that vast future after the Civil War. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
I'm Mark Boulanger. A new history of the International Labour Organization showing its commitment to social justice has been published. The ILO, which is a specialized agency of the United Nations, is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. It was created in 1919 after the First World War as a way of promoting peace through decent work. The organization sets minimum labor standards, such as hours of work and maternity leave. It operates in a tripartite manner with representatives of governments, business groups, and labor organizations. It is strongly supported by the international labor movement. The new history of the ILO was written by Daniel Mowell of the University of Oslo.
What I try to express by using the term global social policy in the title of my book is that this is the story of an organization that has changed, that has become more global from its beginnings, and that has become more diversified in its work, that has included new groups of workers, new forms of work. So that would be the essence of the book. I structured it along three questions. I'm asking whose organization was the ILO. I'm asking what distinguishes the ILO as an organization. I'm describing it as an organization for social justice. So whose organization? What I want to say is that the history of the ILO for me is a history of progressive inclusions in the plural. The meaning that the ILO has started from a very European, industrial labor emphasis, was concentrated on male labor, on the model of the male breadwinner, and then it opened. And as I said before, decolonization was an important moment when the ILO really became a global and more diversified organization. What distinguishes the ILO, in my view, is tripartism as a model of peaceful settlement of conflict, of cooperation, but also the sort of topics that the ILO gets involved with. And I think it is important to point out that the ILO is an organization that promotes an overarching social objective for all policies. So it's all embracing, actually, in this regard. Social justice is a very broad term, of course, meant different things to different people at different times. But I think there are some aspects, some phrases from the Constitution that represent some sort of a continuum. So poverty anywhere constitutes a danger to prosperity everywhere. Labor is not a commodity, and universal peace can be pursued only if it's based on social justice. So these are elements that apply today to many, in many ways, to present day problems. You could name the whole discussion on standard and non-standard labor. You could mention the whole issue of migration, all what we summarize on the social dimension of globalization.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. You can find our features and daily newscasts on our website at www.radiolabor.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Labor. I'm Mark Belanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 42 degrees Fahrenheit here at the mothership. Expecting to, well, be a tad warmer. Maybe we'll get up to 72 degrees today. Maybe. Overnight lows will be in the mid to upper 40s as they were last night. A high of about 73 to 74 tomorrow. Partly cloudy conditions are happening right at this very moment, though we're going to get plenty of sunshine. Winds will be light and variable for the foreseeable future. We remain under an air stagnation watch until about 4 p.m. local time. And should be partly cloudy tonight and partly cloudy tomorrow. Indeed. Ragweed pollen is rated at low. The air quality index is at 57 parts per million here at the mothership, which is moderate. And the daytime UV index is a seasonal low of 2. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.12 inches, and visibility is down to 6 miles, with relative humidity at 78%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 48 degrees and fair. Paris is 54 and cloudy. Rome is 63 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 60 degrees and fair. Kabul is 42, a shivering 42, and fair. Hong Kong is 69 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 55 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 73 and clear. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and cloudy. And New York, New York is 52 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The British government was accused by opponents of sitting on a parliamentary report examining alleged Russian meddling in British politics because it might contain embarrassing revelations about Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his party. The report by Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee, the ISC, has been cleared by the security services, but it has not yet been given approval for publication by Johnson's Downing Street office, meaning it cannot be released before the December 12th election. Britain has accused Russia of meddling or trying to interfere in Western elections, accusations denied by Vlad, of course. The ISC was examining allegations of Russian activity aimed at the UK, including the 2016 referendum on EU membership, when Johnson was a leading campaigner to leave. Emily Thornberry, the Foreign Affairs spokeswoman for the opposition Labour Party, said the decision not to publish the Parliamentary Committee's report was for utterly unjustifiable, unprecedented, and clearly politically motivated reasons. What is Downing Street so worried about? I fear it is because they realize this report will lead to other questions about the links between Russia and Brexit, she told Parliament. She said questions might be raised about Johnson's relationship to a suspected Russian spy who described the Prime Minister as a very good friend.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Even more anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Iran will start injecting uranium gas into centrifuges at its underground Fordow enrichment facility, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said. A highly symbolic breach that will complicate European efforts to salvage Tehran's nuclear deal. Under the 2015 agreement between Iran and the world powers, Iran agreed to turn the facility into a nuclear physics and technology center where 1,044 centrifuges are used for purposes other than enrichment, such as producing stable isotopes which have a variety of civil uses, mostly in medical. Tehran had agreed to curb its nuke program in exchange for the removal of most international sanctions. It has gradually reduced its commitments to the accord since the administration of Donald Trump withdrew from the agreement in May of 2018 and reimposed sanctions. Yes, elections have consequences, and it just might blow up in our faces now, won't it? That's why we need to work fast and make sure this guy doesn't get reelected. And an impeachment inquiry during his campaign is the perfect way to assure that now, isn't it? All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.